that Atlanta Falcons radio show. So get up, get out, and get something. Get in the zone. We live on the DT. Tune in, cause we about to blow like TNT. Falcons Central Radio show. Gonna be berserk, you heard. We ain't even tripping, catching y'all slipping. What's good, man? On the Pro Football Central Radio Network, hosted by Aaron Freeman and Scott Carasik. What? This right here is a good present for you. Enjoy my presence like I was Santa Claus, man. Chillin', doing it.
Welcome back to another edition of Falcons Central Radio. Scott Carasik here with Aaron Freeman. We've also got our special guest, Nick Slegal. Probably messed it up, like I mess up every other name, but welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks, guys. How's it going?
It's going great.
Good to be
Definitely
here.
going great.
Another
So a
great
little
Tuesday
bit
night.
So a little bit about Nick. He works for eDraft. He's one of the main fantasy football guys out there. Anybody we should be concerned about this year in fantasy football, as far as this guy's going to be great and maybe we'll luckily, get this steal in the 12th round?
Ooh, that's there's a couple guys like that. My big guy, and I shouldn't even be telling you this, to be honest, but my guy's Reggie Bush. I've always been high on him coming out of USC. Obviously, the Saints, didn't really know how to use him. But towards the end, they started sort of figuring it out, and the Dolphins killed it with him. I mean, he was the 17th and the 14th best running back in standard leagues, and just like a position higher in each for PPR leagues the last couple of years with the Dolphins. He's going to the pass-happy Lions, who have really been looking for someone to replace Javid Best ever since he went down with the concussion thing. And Bush is great out in space. He's going to get 15 to 18 carries and then 5 to 6 targets a game. His numbers are just going to be through the roof. We're talking like borderline running back 1, but like high-end running back 2, that a lot of people are overvaluing because they think he's older than he is. He's only 28, got a lot ahead of him still. So I think like redraft and dynasty, Reggie Bush is a great mid-round grab. You can get him like anywhere between like the 10th, 12th, 13th round.
Oh, wow. See, I wasn't a huge fan of Reggie Bush starting out because, he was a Satan, but I can forgive him now that he's a Lion. He's got to hang out with Calvin Johnson of Georgia Tech, Matt Stafford of Georgia. I could get with Reggie Bush. His line has to hold up, but I could get on the Reggie Bush bandwagon. Anybody... Now, one of my favorite players, because I went to school with him, is Andre Roberts. Fantasy value for him.
Ooh, that's a good question. With the Cardinals, it's hard to say who's going to be the main guy right now. You're looking at a depth chart. I'm trying to pull it up here because I'm really slow sometimes. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, so right now they have him listed as a number 2 guy. I like him. I think he's a good number 2 guy. I could see I'm really high on Ryan Swope. I really liked him coming out of college. I could see him possibly pushing for that number 2 spot on the depth chart at some point. However, I don't think that point is this year. I think if you're looking at Ryan Swope, you're looking dynasty, like further down the road. If you're looking at redraft leagues, Roberts is going to get a lot of targets. Carson Palmer he's a gunslinger. He loves to throw the ball. Their running game there's a lot of guys there, but they don't really know who the guy is yet. I don't have any faith in Rashard Mendenhall at all. So between Larry Fitzgerald, Rob Hauser, who's getting a ton of praise from the new head coach, and Roberts, I think those 3 are going to be the main top guys for Carson Palmer to target a lot. And especially if the Cardinals go down, then they're going to get really gun happy, just like Oakland did last year. And that's where Carson Palmer made his bread and butter fantasy-wise. And if that's the case, Roberts, Fitzgerald, everybody in the passing game is going to benefit. So he's got some decent fantasy value, but it's more potential than set in stone. So, I mean, his ceiling is probably low-end running, wide receiver 2, and it can go as low as bench option. So you could take a flyer on him maybe later in the draft, but I wouldn't draft him like solely relying on him to get the job done for you.
Oh no, I was thinking as like a 14th rounder, 15th rounder kind of guy.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
No love for Michael Floyd in there for the Cardinals?
No, I am not a Michael Floyd fan now.
Okay. All right. I've been hearing that, this is going to be his breakout year after he kind of just did nothing last year. So,
Yeah, I know. We've been hearing that. I don't. I've never seen it. Last year didn't surprise me, so I don't think we're going to see anything big from him this year, to be honest.
okay. So, talking a little bit about the Falcons, are we just with fantasy? Are we thinking that basically everybody's going to put up the same numbers that they did last year, and maybe we get a little bit? Well, hopefully we get a lot more out of Steven Jackson than Michael Turner. Is it just a repeat? The Falcons are now like that New Orleans Saints reliable machine that can just churn out fantasy numbers year in year out now.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing with the Falcons. If across the board we're looking at very similar numbers to last year, I think the one thing you'll notice is probably Julio Jones, Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez. You're all going to see maybe 1 to 2 less touchdowns, and that's just going to be because Steven Jackson is going to be getting those on the ground. You guys are going to have a real running game again, unlike last year, and it's going to really balance out the offense and really work for everybody. You're going to see Julio and Roddy put up similar numbers to they did last year, which is awesome. I mean, they were both wide receiver 1 options last year, which is really insane when they come from the same team. You don't have that too often. Obviously, Gonzalez was the 3rd best tight end in the league. I see him easily repeating that this year. And Matt Ryan was the 7th best QB. I think he could slip a little because of the emergence of all the running QBs and the more points that they stack up. So he might finish like 8th or 9th, but still a very solid QB1 option across the board. I mean, if you look at Steven Jackson's numbers too, from 2012 all the way back to 2007, he's never finished worse than 16th in fantasy, and he's finished as high as 9th. So he's always been like a high-end running back 2, low-end running back 1 option. And that's on teams where they were stacking 8 in the box against him because his offense had nothing else. Now he's in a really balanced offense. He's a workhorse that's only missed 13 games in 9 seasons. He's going to do wonders for the Falcons offense.
I'm excited now. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's get this season going.
So, as a Packers fan, I'm a little worried.
Oh, okay.
I would be as well as if I was a Packers fan. But
Okay.
So my prediction for Steven Jackson is basically just to do what he did last year. 1,000 to 1,100 yards, 325 to 350 yards receiving, 12 touchdowns. That sound about realistic, or am I shooting high?
It's like you're looking at my computer. Right now on my computer, I've listed 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, 300 yards receiving. So we're on the exact same page, my friend.
Because I'm excited to see what the Falcons do. It's been very rare where a team has had a top. I wouldn't say he's a top 10 running back right now, but I'd say he's at least a top 15 running back. You got a pair of top 10 wide receivers, and then the best tight end of all time. As far as weapons are concerned, Ryan's pretty much set. But when you've got guys like Jacquizz Rodgers or Harry Douglas, do you think those guys really have any fantasy value, or just kind of, if you're in a 32-team league, that's when you take them?
Yeah, in the super deep leagues. But I think it'll depend on how we see the Falcons use Jacquizz through training camp into the preseason. Because if they decide to feature him in the passing game more and keep Jackson into block, there's a number of scenarios where Jacquizz could get enough touches to warrant, like a running back 2 spot or a flex spot in PPR leagues. But it'll totally depend on the Falcons and how they actually utilize him. And I think it's one of those things where, like you said, unless it's a really deep league, you don't draft him initially. I wouldn't. I'd probably just wait to grab him off the wire if he picks up, some steam with the offense midway through the season. I don't think I'd waste a draft pick on him, though, unless I was in a super deep league.
Okay. Nick, you said you were a Packers fan. Okay, I'm trying to look at these Packers receivers. Everybody's talking about Randall Cobb taking that next step. He was their top guy last year. Jordy Nelson didn't have the sort of production that we had gotten accustomed to, and then you always have James Jones, who I've had on a couple of my fantasy teams the last couple of years. And when I start him, he doesn't do anything. And when I bench him, he gets like 3 touchdowns. So, which of these Packers receivers, if I'm, who's going to be the guy this year?
Oh, it's definitely going to be Randall Cobb. I think with James Jones, he's got the talent, but last year was sort of an outlier. He drops a lot more balls than that usually. If you look at the rest of his numbers through history, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of a dip in his touchdown numbers and his yards this year. Jordy Nelson, if he can stay healthy, will definitely be the number 2. But it's all about Randall Cobb. It's the Randall Cobb show. The Packers want to utilize him like the Vikings wanted to utilize Percy Harvin. Like everyone thinks the Seahawks will. They want to give him carries out of the backfield, dump off passes at the line of scrimmage, routes across the middle from the slot, lining up on the outside. They just want to get the ball in his hands as much as possible and let him eat up yards after the catch. And they're even he's only gonna return kicks or punts, one or the other. I can't remember which one it is now. So they're gonna take a little off his plate there to try to keep him fresher. And he's just gonna be an explosive weapon. Obviously, he built a big rapport with Rodgers when Finley started acting like a little child. So they have a really good rapport. It's his favorite target, and he's just going to be unstoppable. And I'm not saying that as a fan, really. Like I'm saying that as an analyst. Like they have the potential to put up really good numbers. Cobb could finish top. He could finish as like the 5th best wide receiver in fantasy by the end of the season.
Okay.
So basically, draft Randall Cobb, take any of the Falcons' big weapons, profit.
Yeah, that's a good recipe. Yeah.
Asking you some Packers questions because I'm trying to get some lowdown for when the Falcons face off with them later in the year, or by the time the Falcons play them. I think it's like week 14. Are we expecting Eddie Lacy, Jonathan Franklin, or any of these running backs to kind of emerge as the guy, or is it just going to be like a committee system where a little bit of this guy, a little bit of that guy?
The official story changes a lot. My prediction since the moment they drafted Jonathan Franklin has been that Jonathan Franklin's going to be the guy that's in there most of the time, getting the regular carries, playing a part in the passing game, and Eddie Lacy's going to eat up the short yardage in the goal line situation. So they're both going to have their fantasy value. I think they're both going to play a part. I think the biggest question mark for the Packers, though, is Mike McCarthy has never been able to manage the running game. He abandons it way too easily. Sometimes even when it's working, there's 3 games last year where the Packers didn't run a single time in the second half. So I think the biggest question mark with the Packers running backs is if Mike McCarthy can figure out how to use them properly. Because if he can, they have 2 dangerous weapons in those guys that can make a big difference. But I don't think there will be a single the guy. I think they both have their roles and they'll play them well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when they drafted, I wasn't a huge Lacy guy at Alabama. I think he benefited a lot more from having that monster offensive line than, vice versa. And then they took Franklin, who seemed like a perfect fit for that offense. And then so it was kind of the idea that, Franklin might be the cream that rises to the top. But at the same time, it's like, if you're Mike McCarthy, you have Aaron Rodgers, the best quarterback in the league, why not throw the ball 50 times, And if Randall Cobb is basically, as you were alluding to earlier, Percy Harvin type of matchup nightmare for defenses, how much opportunity is it going to be for those guys to run the football? But, people didn't think much of Ryan Grant a couple of years ago, and he was, killing it during the early years of Rodgers before he became Rodgers, I guess.
Yeah, I'm with you. Ryan Grant actually, fun fact, put up 1,000 yards in 8 games, which was pretty impressive. And then he totally tailed off. But it's with the running backs, we're looking at for Franklin maybe like 60 to 70, 80 yards a game on the ground, maybe 20 to 50 depending on if he breaks anything in the passing game. And for Lacy, maybe 20 to 50 yards and a touchdown or 2. But you're right. When you have Aaron Rodgers, it's really hard to cut back on the passing game when you have the best quarterback in the league and a lot of weapons out there to throw to. And I think the biggest X factor, obviously, that really plays into all of it is that offensive line. They've shuffled 2 guys from the right to the left. They're having an open competition for one of the spots on the right. So if it goes the way it's supposed to, we could see an even more explosive offense. And if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to, it'll probably look just like last year because Rodgers still put up those numbers even though he got sacked 53 times.
Mm.
That's a lot.
Oh, go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
Like I said, that is a lot of just getting hit, getting sacked 53 times.
Oh yeah, it was second or third most last year.
That not for me.
No.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Packers and the Falcons, how similar they are kind of overall in terms of, some of the areas of the Packers are deficient at, like running the football. The Falcons were last year, and the Falcons got Jackson, and the Packers got the two rookies. And, they're shuffling their offensive line. The offensive line of Atlanta, they got, 2-3 new starters now, so they're doing kind of the same thing. And the Packers are looking for more pass rushers, and the Falcons are trying to upgrade their pass. They're kind of like identical teams in the same exact spot. And I think one of the interesting things is going to be, maybe by the time they meet in December, which of the team has kind of put it all together to be in the best position going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I see a ton of similarities between these two teams, and I think you really hit on them. There's some talented pieces on defense, but you just kind of need to see it all put together, and that goes true for both teams. I look at the Packers, and on paper they have some of the most talented players in the league on defense, but they can never put it all together. And I think that plays into the offense and sort of how the gunslinger mentality Aaron Rodgers always has to have to keep us in the game. I don't know if you guys remember the Falcons game last year. It was such an even match. It was like 14-13 until the fourth quarter, and then the Packers finally, broke it away a little bit. But that was an interesting game because it was just two teams that were so well matched. And if you look at it even from a fantasy perspective, across the board, quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, running back, they have very similar players with semi-similar numbers. And so it's just two teams that obviously, I don't know if you guys read eDraft a whole lot, but we came out with our first power rankings for the season over there, and I think the Packers, we averaged it out over like 10 different writers, and I think the Packers and Falcons were like right next to each other, somewhere between like 4 and 6.
That sounds about right to me. I mean, you got to earn number one, of course, but
Yeah.
between 4 and 6, I'll take it because I feel like they can win number one.
Yeah, it's one of those things where they need to show it. They need to prove it still. There's some question marks, like I said, on defense, but if they can put it all together, either one of these teams could easily win number one in the rankings.
Okay. Nick, one last question from me. I got one of my fantasy teams. I'm in a keeper league. I got Phillip Rivers, Frank Gore, and MJD. And obviously my team was a monster like in 2009, but basically I'm screwed because all these guys are stinking. Is there any hope for me that any one of these guys are going to still show something, that they got something left in the tank this year?
Yeah, I think so. Not Phillip Rivers. I'm sorry. I'm not a big Rivers fan. I have little faith in him at this point, especially with that shoddy offensive line in front of him. But as far as like Frank Gore, especially with Michael Crabtree going down, they're going to lean on Gore. Gore's always been a dependable running back. Near bottom end running back 1, top end running back 2 numbers. I think you can depend on him just fine for another year, maybe even 2, just fine, as long as he doesn't get hurt, which usually isn't the case. And as far as MJD goes, he just got cleared to play. I think there's a bit more risk there, but if he can get back to where he was, even if it's not, like you said, like 2009 numbers, even if he can just get back to a serviceable, point, you're looking at like a mid-level running back 2 option, which is just fine. But hopefully you have someone ready to step in a year or two, because that's MJD and Frank Gore both aren't long for the league, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to try to get Trent Richardson, or if I can, or somebody like that.
Yeah,
probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Because MJD's pretty much done. I thought he was going to be the guy the Falcons signed this offseason, because I thought the Jaguars were going to cut him, and MJD, he knows cutter. But no, they never cut him.
No, they didn't. You're lucky, though. You would rather have Steven Jackson anyway.
Yeah, I think I would. Too.
All day, every day, because Steven Jackson takes care of his body. MJD, maybe not. But Steven Jackson takes care of his body. He busts his butt to take care of his body.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think you rack up, with just under 2,400 career carries, 10,000 yards, 56 TDs. and 4.2 yards per carry. Like you don't do that from 22 to 23 to 30 years old unless you seriously take care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a ridiculous career, and he's only played 9 years. He's played 10 years, but to be fair, he played in St. Louis with stacked boxes and horrible surroundings.
Yeah, the Falcons are trying to put together the anti-aging team by putting Steven Jackson and Tony Gonzalez on the same team.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you here. I think if the Falcons win the Super Bowl, Steven Jackson just says peace. Tony Gonzalez just says peace. I don't think Roddy White does, but I think those two guys are just like, all right, we're here, we're done, bye.
Steven Jackson's got to be sore. I mean, he's taken such a beating for those 10,000 yards, dude. Like, way more than most people at that point. So I'm with you. If you guys won the Super Bowl this year, I could see him just saying, I'm done. See you guys. I got my ring. And I think Gonzalez is going to either way. And it's one of those things for, like, even as a Packer fan, like, I'm kind of rooting for the Falcons this year just because, like, after the, Ray Lewis got his last hurrah, like, I'd much rather see Tony Gonzalez get his.
Because Gonzalez is much classier than Ray Lewis.
Oh, yeah. And that guy spent how long on just, like, the worst teams ever and was such a good teammate and such a good sport about it. And, like, he waited how long to, like, the very end of his career to be like, look, guys, can I please just have, like, a year to go somewhere? He was even super classy about that. So, like, I've always been rooting for that guy.
Don't let Ray Lewis hear you say that about him.
Yeah, right?
He might come eat you.
Okay, comparing Tony Gonzalez to Ray Lewis, I'm not saying he's Aaron Hernandez here. I'm saying he's Ray Lewis.
Okay.
All right.
You still might take offense for being number 2 on your list of classy guys. It's Ray Lewis. He might murder you.
No. He's not really on my classy guys list. He's just on my guys who played a lot of football and, led his team list. He's not. I don't really see him as a super classy guy.
Okay,
He's just Ray Lewis.
I'm just saying, don't let him hear you say that. Might be trouble for you later on.
Let's put it this way. I would have rather seen Randy Moss get a Super Bowl ring last year than Ray Lewis.
Okay, that's okay. All right, Nick, I hear that you got a new show. You're a fellow Pro Football Central brother?
Yeah, I'm part of the PFC family now. It's Fantasy Forecast Central Radio. We just earlier today we did our first episode. We had Zach Law and CD Carter on for our first episode. It was great. It went really well. I was really happy with how it turned out. It just premiered, I want to say, like an hour ago, maybe 2 hours ago. So everyone should go check that out. It's on every Tuesday. Probably comes out just a couple hours before your show, so they can listen to ours and they can listen to yours.
Sounds like a great doubleheader.
Cigar fans, check out fifthdowncigar.com and enter the coupon code PFC to get 10% off your order. Lots of nice high-end cigars. That's fifthdowncigar.com. Enter the code PFC for 10% off your order.
All right, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show. I'm Aaron Freeman with Scott Carasik. We're here joined by a good friend of the show, Gary Davenport. You know him on Bleacher Report, fantasy football writer, as well as his radio appearances on Sirius XM Radio. How's it going, Gary?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. Glad to have the opportunity to speak with you guys.
All right. Yeah, we were just talking some fantasy football with another guest, and I guess we'll just keep it going, try to get prepped for this upcoming season. I saw a article you wrote the other day about some of the riskier running backs, in that you listed Darren McFadden as one of the, I think you had him as a sell as opposed to a buy. Could you go a little more in depth on that?
The thing with McFadden, it's just all about health. He showed back in 2010 when he was a top 10 running back what he's capable of if he could stay on the field, but he just can't stay on the field. I don't think he's ever played more than 13 games in a season, and he's missed, I believe, 23 games in 5 years. You're talking about an average of over 4 games a season when your fantasy regular season's usually 13, maybe 14 weeks long. You just can't afford to basically be counting on a guy to miss that much time every year.
I completely agree. I wouldn't take a chance on McFadden for that exact reason. Even if he did get 1,000 yards in those 13 games, when are those 13 games going to be?
Exactly. And it's not like it's happened once with Darren McFadden or twice. Yeah, DeMarco Murray's in a very similar boat, but I'm a little more inclined to at least have some sort of hope where he's concerned, because it's only been 2 years. We're talking 5 years with Darren McFadden. At some point, you just have to realize that that's just how things are.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that he was terrible last year, so it doesn't give you a whole lot of confidence that even if he is healthy, that he's going to be that productive.
I think I drafted him in one league as a third running back, and as soon as I did it, I was regretting it. So I'll probably live to rue that day by mid-season or so.
That's about how I feel about Darren McFadden. I still have yet to do my first fantasy football draft. I'm going up against a couple guys I went to school with, and they've given me the number one pick. I hate it.
Oh, the number one overall pick?
The number one overall pick, and I hate it. And I'm trying to trade down, and nobody wants it. And I'm just like, you might as well just give me the last pick.
You know, this year I almost prefer the back end, I think. Because if you walk into that first overall pick and you don't take Adrian Peterson, and he has a year that's anything like last year, you'll never forgive yourself. But history has not been kind to 2,000-yard running backs or the last 5 consecutive top fantasy backs. None of those guys are repeated either. And it just seems like the chips are stacked against him, and you want to say, maybe Doug Martin, but then if you pass on Peterson, after what he did last year, I just don't see how you can.
I see that, a lot of people putting Arian Foster as that, number 2 rated running back behind Peterson. In Scott's situation, if he takes Foster number 1 overall, how is that a good move? Is that a safer pick, or is it just, just as much risk?
That's probably a good word for Arian Foster, is the safer pick. He may, I don't know if I say he has a higher floor than Peterson. It's just, it comes down to whether or not you think Peterson can come close to last year. Do you have to take him number 1 overall? I don't have a problem with people taking Arian Foster first overall. If I were to pass on Peterson, it would probably be for Doug Martin and the Buccaneers, if only because I think Martin has a higher ceiling than Foster does. That said, Foster has a very high floor. This is a guy that's averaged over 15 total touchdowns a year the past 3 seasons, and that kind of production is hard to come by sometimes.
See, that's my thought, is go Doug Martin because he's got PPR value and we're in a PPR league.
You see, and I had the 2nd overall pick in a draft that just started a couple days ago. First one took Peterson, I took Martin 2nd and didn't think twice about it.
See, I'm thinking just take Martin first and surprise the entire league and be like, hey, I like Doug Martin. But then it goes against my don't ever take any NFC South players, because during those 2 weeks that they play Atlanta, I don't put them in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I take the fantasy hit.
Oh, that's loyalty right there. I can't say that I'll enjoy starting players against my beloved Cleveland Browns, but after all the things that the Browns have put me through over the last 30 years, they sort of
Payback. Oh, all right, yeah. So we're expecting, Doug Martin to terrorize the NFC South this year? Once more, I guess.
I mean, it's kind of hard not to like looking at what he did last year, and he showed in that 2-game stretch against, I think it was Minnesota and Oakland, just what he's capable of. If he could put that together with a little more consistency, the numbers could be up there.
Yeah, he's getting help because he's getting Carl Nicks back healthy. He's getting Davin Joseph, and he didn't have Davin Joseph at all last year. Nicks got hurt midway through the year, so and then they picked up Gabe Karimi, who was not great in Chicago, but he was a pretty good run blocker over there. So it does seem like the arrow is definitely pointing up for Doug Martin.
I think having his college offensive line coach isn't going to hurt.
No, Not at all. There's some good running. Atlanta picked them up a nice little running back of their own in the offseason, so they don't have anything to complain about.
That's true. Still staying on the subject of NFC South running backs, I'm hearing a lot of talk about, this is a make or break year for Mark Ingram. I've seen, personally, I think, and I've seen a lot of fantasy rankings having Sproles as the top back for the Saints. But is this going to be the year that Mark Ingram kind of rises to the surface, or is this going to continue to be the ho-hum, type of player that he's been so far?
If Mark Ingram does have a great year, then I'm going to look pretty silly because I've been saying for the past month or so that I have absolutely zero faith in him whatsoever.
Okay.
Not only would I take Darren Sproles as the first fantasy back from New Orleans off the board, Ingram wouldn't be my second one. I'd take Pierre Thomas ahead of Mark Ingram.
Okay. Well, if people do take Pierre Thomas and they're not Falcon fans like Scott, start him against the Falcons because he always kills the Falcons. So, yeah.
And for that, I never take him because that's his only fantasy value. He gets like 150 versus the Falcons, and he gets like 12 versus everybody else. So it's like, come on, man.
Every year he seems to end up on quite a few of my teams. And, yeah, most weeks he's not really startable, but he just always seems to be that last running back that I grab in drafts. Oh, Pierre Thomas is there. Okay.
Yeah.
Have your seat at the end of the bench.
Like he got 400. He got 473 yards last year, right? 194 of it were against NFC South teams. 94 of it was against the Falcons, and then 110 of it was against the friggin' Panthers. He's useless unless you start him against the NFC South.
Yeah, just wait for those division games and plug him in.
Yep, perfect buzz.
I'm going to be looking at him in a different light now. Hey, it's Atlanta week. Get in there, Pierre. I need some points.
He'll get you 8. He'll get you 10. He's a good bye week back.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, about last NFC South running back question. Any faith in D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart not, allowing Cam Newton to lead the Panthers in rushing this year?
Oh, I've drafted Stewart in a few leagues just because he fell to a spot in the draft where I was like, oh, well. But it's not a pick that I'm real enthusiastic about. And I try to get Williams later, but it seems like he's always been getting sniped out from underneath me. I mean, Stewart, the ankle, we're still hearing nothing but ankle. And Williams will go out there and look great for a half and then terrible the next half. And from a fantasy perspective, unless they drop in the draft to the point where, because there's a point that any player drops far enough, I'll draft them. But Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams, neither one are players I'm targeting this year.
Okay. So around ballpark, what round are we looking at where the value kind of trumps?
Oh, I wouldn't look at Stewart as more than probably my fourth running back, but I have a tendency to load up at running back. So a lot of times my fourth running back looks like other teams' third running back.
Okay.
That's the strategy I need to stick with because my running backs always seem to be about one deep. I've got like one guy who's a running back 1, and then I've got a bunch of running back 7s.
And this year you're seeing a lot more fantasy. It's almost like we went back in time a little bit. But a lot of the drafts that I've been in so far this year, the vast majority of them actually have been running back heavy at the top.
I'll keep my eye on that.
I've got to do a pre-draft with a different group and just try and get that number 1 pick on a mock because there's going to be some stupid picks like there always are, but I got to make sure it's the right stupid pick.
Yeah, but there's one nice thing about picking from either the top spot or the 12th spot, for that matter. At least you're picking on the turn. You get those 2 picks in a row. I hate being stuck in the middle. It always feels like if I'm in the middle of the draft that I can never get any kind of momentum going, like I'm just trying to paddle upstream the entire draft. Trying not to get caught at the end of runs instead. I want to start the runs. I want to force the action. I want to make people make stupid picks.
So you're the guy who has the 12th pick and takes Calvin Johnson and Percy Harvin and makes everybody else go, damn, I need a wide receiver.
No, I'm not the guy with the wide receivers, but yeah, something like that. I wish Calvin Johnson is a guy that if I'm picking after about 8 in the first round, I've got to start looking at Calvin Johnson if he's still on the board. Other than that, I personally, given my personal preference, I would much rather have a running back, but if he's just sitting there staring at me.
Do you think Julio Jones can possibly sneak up into that late first round mix? You know, be one of those?
Oh, I think he'll probably stay a mid to late second round pick. Most people are drafting him as a top 5 wide receiver. I'm a little wary, if only because there are so many mouths to feed in the Falcons passing game with Roddy White and Tony Gonzalez, and now Steven Jackson can catch the ball. It's certainly nothing against Julio Jones. He showed last year in the playoffs what he's really capable of. We saw his ceiling, and it's pretty high. But there are only so many passes. Even on a team with an offense like the Falcons, as potent as it is, there's still only so many targets to go around.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not like Megatron getting 700 targets a year from Stafford, because all they do is throw the ball and they have nothing else on that offense.
Yeah, and I'm sure they wish they could drop that number a little bit, and that maybe Ryan Broyles can stay healthy and they can develop that second target. Every team wants. I mean, you don't necessarily need to have a duo like Roddy White and Julio Jones, but you at least need that second receiver opposite your superstar to be able to keep defenses a little honest. But some teams struggle with it. I mean, Chicago doesn't have anything opposite Brandon Marshall. Cincinnati doesn't really have anything opposite A.J. Green.
So how does Brandon Lloyd not have a job? Is my question there.
He must have made a whole bunch of friends with the Patriots last year for them to be this hard up at receiver and not picking up the phone. They worked out Laurent Robinson today.
Yeah.
I liked Laurent Robinson when he was in Atlanta. I thought he was pretty good. And then
he's a concussion waiting to happen, though.
I'm not disagreeing with you there. I'm just saying I thought he was pretty good, but
it sounds like he's going to hook on with someone because he worked out with the Jets, I believe, on Monday. And Peyton Hill has picked him up a job today, signed with Tampa.
This is about that time when people just randomly sign random people. So,
well, you start looking at the holes on your roster, and if a roster spot frees up like it did in Tampa with the whole Eric Wright fiasco, then, and looking at the backfield depth that they really don't have behind Doug Martin, I can understand why they give Hillis a look. Meanwhile, Michael Turner can't buy a job interview, but
that's what happens when you're done.
And he still might catch on to a roster by the time we get in the heart of training camp. All it takes is one injury for someone to pick up the phone and call Michael Turner.
He was fed probably 20 touchdowns last year. If he would have just pushed through the wall, he would have easily had 20 touchdowns last year, and he just could not push through the wall on the 1 yard line.
It's hard to believe that that's a guy whose nickname was once Turner the Burner.
Yeah.
When he came out of college, yeah, he was Turner the Burner, but now,
I'm waiting for him to go to the Giants when Andre Brown suffers the inevitable season-ending injury.
You think Andre Brown's going to suffer that season-ending injury?
Yeah, he hasn't been hurt like every year.
If he does, watch out for David Wilson. Because that's the only thing keeping David Wilson, I think, out of legitimate, probably the RB1 conversation. One of those top 12 backs is that no one's sure how many touches Andre Brown's going to get this year. If he were to go by the wayside and Wilson becomes the unquestioned featured back, look out.
So you're telling me I should draft David Wilson in the hopes of stashing him?
I don't mind getting Wilson as my third. It's like a lot of people are drafting him as their second running back. Like I said, I have a tendency to hoard them. So in a couple of leagues, I've gotten him as my third running back. If I go running back, because there's a flex spot, I don't mind having him as my second running. The upside's there. He might have a pretty low floor if Andre Brown poaches a lot of touches and they end up in more of a timeshare than I expect him to. But if the carries are split about the way I figure they will be, I think Wilson will be a viable RB2, and his upside could be quite a bit higher. And he's one of those guys that can break a game open every time he touches the ball.
So what you're saying is, in the league that I go against you, wait to take David Wilson, and running back might be the best way to go.
I have never I've tried just about every draft strategy you can possibly, because I'm in way too many fantasy leagues every year. I've tried taking a quarterback early, hated it. Every league that I ever start out and go wide receiver heavy at the beginning of the draft, at the end of the draft, I hate my team. Always happens. Even if the team ends up being good, I hate it in the beginning. If I load up on running backs early, I'm usually happy. I just feel better about my team, and those teams usually do well. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
I'll have to remember this for my. I've told myself I'm only doing 2 teams this year because I always end up in like 10 leagues, and I can never manage all of them. I've got my 2 leagues set up, and I'm done. No more. I might do a third, but
I was in, I think, 25 last year.
So you probably owned every player in the NFL on one of your teams, right?
Quite a few. I don't think I had Darren McFadden on any of those teams.
Okay.
He did, however, win the Bleacher Report iPad from it.
Yes, I did. And actually, Doug Martin was on that. That team had Doug Martin, Drew Brees, I think Marshawn Lynch. It was a pretty stacked team. I got Martin fairly late in that particular draft as I think my 3rd running back, and then as he started to take off in the second half of the season, so did that team. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting hot at the right time.
Speaking of rookie running backs getting hot late in the season, are we looking at, I hear a lot of hype about Monty Ball and, maybe Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh, and, Green Bay's got a couple of rookie running backs. Are one of these rookie running backs going to emerge, or, are we stuck in an era where it's all about the committee system? And
if there's a guy who's probably got the clearest path to a big rookie year, it's probably Le'Veon Bell. It's only because there just doesn't seem to be a lot of viable competition for carries there. Monty Ball, from what I'm hearing at the start of camp, Ronnie Hillman was running ahead of Monty Ball, so I don't think he's just going to necessarily walk into a full-time role with the Broncos. He's still going to see the ball regardless, but I don't think he'll see it enough to be a startable running back, like an RB1, a top 25 guy, at least early in the year. A guy I'm going to be watching very closely in training camp is Zach Stacy in St. Louis, because that's a very cloudy backfield situation. From watching Stacy on tape from when he was at Vanderbilt, I like what I see. Isaiah Peed did nothing there last year. Daryl Richardson's a good player, but not a great one. I think Stacy might have the talent to win that job, and if he does, he could be a sneaky little value pick a little later in drafts.
Okay. I'm writing that down. I'm going to need that tip because I'm trying to get back in the playoffs.
I'm trying to actually beat my friends in the league because it'll be about $250 to $300 if I do. And
if you get to beat your friend and win money both at the same time, that just makes it so much sweeter.
Oh, exactly. And with that $250, if I combine that with another league and win that league for another $250, that's a new TV that I would love to get.
To watch your Red Zone on.
I keep telling myself I'm going to enter one of the high stakes contests one of these years. One of the gentlemen who's a regular listener on the podcast I do with Greg Kellogg, Henry Muto, he won, I forget which one of the contests it won. It was one of the $100,000 ones last year. First place, 100 large.
Where's this at?
I forget which one of the high stakes contests it was. I don't believe it was the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. It was one of the other ones. Now, Henry will kill me if he hears this and realizes I forgot. But anyway, he actually came in, I believe, 4th place, too, with another one of his teams, because he buys more than Henry doesn't play around when it comes to these high-stakes games. And I believe he come in, 4th place, too, so he actually ended up winning, $130,000 altogether.
Yeah, but you have to do... God, these entry fees are ridiculous.
Yes.
$1,650 a team?
Yeah, I think this particular contest, it was $3.50 a team or $400 a team, and you have 3 teams for $1,000. So he did the 3 teams for $1,000 deal. Takes money to make money, I guess.
Yeah.
That's insane. Even the football guys won. Yeah, not for me. Not for me, because that's just insane. Like,
Well,
300.
and there's a lot of skill involved in it, playing the wire right and managing a team, but there's also a lot of luck involved. I mean, one big injury and you're toast.
Yeah. My weakness is always playing the wire. I'm always like the guy an hour or two too late after someone picks up, a couple of years ago with Peyton Hillis. I missed that boat, But yeah.
That's why I've never been a fan of, well, at some point in the week you want to have first come, first served waivers, but I think there should be a waiver wire at the beginning of the free agent period. And that way the guys that are sitting in front of their computers all day, like me, don't necessarily have an advantage because everybody gets a chance to at least put in a bid on the guy.
Yeah.
The first come, first serve works out okay for me because I'm in front of a computer all the time, so I see a guy's available and snatch him up 18 seconds after he hits the waiver wire.
Yeah. I got a friend who basically doesn't do work at his job by just basically sitting in front of a computer and snatching up guys as, me, myself, the day job is actually doing work during the day and can't be scooping fantasy guys. So that always sucks.
What's this work thing you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gary, you mentioned you are on a podcast. What other places can people find you at? Because I know you're spread around a lot.
I'm an NFL on-call and fantasy football writer for Bleacher Report. I'm an IDP senior staff writer at Fantasy Sharks, contributing author and contributing editor at Football Diehards. On Tuesday and Saturday night, Greg Kellogg and I do the Kellogg's Comments podcast on Blog Talk Radio, which I actually took the evening off tonight to appear with you fine gentlemen. And Google Gary Davenport and you'll find me. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at IDP Manor. The fantasy football stuff that I do for Fantasy Sharks, I focus on the individual defensive players for IDP leagues. So if you have any questions in that regard or anything, hit me up on Twitter and I will do my best.
That's a lot of places.
That's definitely a lot of places. Thanks for coming on, Gary. It's awesome.
Oh, my pleasure, gentlemen. Anytime.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
All right, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show. We talked a lot about fantasy football today, and this will be our Falcons portion of the show. So all you Falcon fans that tune in and are like, why are they talking about the Falcons? It's the week of training camp. This is where you're gonna enjoy. So Scott, some bad news. This came out today a couple hours ago. One of your guys that you had picked last week to make the team didn't even make it to training camp.
Yeah, Timmy Toon got cut. I call it do-over. I call it mulligan. I'm just going to say right now, Martell Moore takes that spot. That's my no real, actual backing to that other than I really liked what Martell Moore did in college, and I think he would do very well in a pass-based offense, and I think he could surprise some people. And I think he could earn that last spot on the roster with his ability to return. So I've got Martell Moore taking that final spot. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it's an undrafted free agent that I got wrong. So better than having a guy cut before training camp. Oh man, I think he got injured, and that's why they cut him. That's the only real reason to not let a guy go to training camp, except maybe a signings around the corner.
Yeah, who knows? I think that happened last year with who was it? Cody Piercy. I think everybody was like, "Oh, Cody Piercy's going to tear it up." Didn't even make it to training camp. It was like, "Oh, okay, there goes that."
Yeah. It was like, what's going on, man? WTF? Where did Cody go? And then now he's not with anybody, so you're just like, oh, he's just a really fast, skinny white dude. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he's. Let's put it this way: he went to college to get a degree. He didn't go to college to play in the NFL, and he just lucked out and had a camp invitation that he never got to cash in. But I mean, anyway,
I'm gonna miss Tim Toon, Mr. Irrelevant, and I thought he did some things, but it wasn't meant to be, I guess.
at least it wasn't like a Chase Kaufman type mistake, where I'm sitting here expecting Chase Kaufman to be like the number 2 wide receiver this year, not wide receiver, number 2 tight end this year, and then boom, cut. That'd be horrible.
Exactly. All right.
But no.
We got some other Falcons news on the pipeline that came over the wire over the weekend. A lot of hullabaloo about, potential holdout with Desmond Trufant, Falcons top pick.
I bet you he signed something tomorrow morning.
Okay. So, all you people that are listening to this on Wednesday morning, hopefully you'll be, as you're listening to us talk about this, you'll be reading the story where Desmond Trufant has agreed to terms. But, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, I don't see why people are making so much out of this. It's a contract for a rookie that hasn't even hit training camp yet. Now, if training camp starts and he, obviously doesn't do anything, well, there's only so much you can do. But right now, I'm not really worried about it. It's one of those things. He'll be signed. He'll be in camp. I'm more worried about Sean Renfree not signing his contract with how easy those 7th round contracts are. It's like, dude, just fucking sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in a position with Trufant. It just, now that we got the new CBA and the rookie wage scale, if he was a top 10 pick, because there's a little bit more additional language that kind of goes in those picks that kind of can take a little while to work out. I think, it's possible that he's not there the first day of camp, but it's one of those situations where if he misses more than, if he's not practicing by Friday night, the afternoon practice on Friday, which would be the 4th practice of Falcons training camp, I will be utterly shocked. But Trufant seems like the type of guy that he wants to be there, and if he's not, under contract Wednesday or Thursday, he's going to tell his agent Thursday night, get the deal done. I'm going to be there practicing Friday, and it's just, one of those things where I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Holdouts today aren't as big as they were, years ago, where it could go 2 weeks or something like that with the first round guy.
Yeah. I mean, a few years ago, Sam Baker sat out a practice, and that was on the old scale. Since then, Thomas Dimitroff has not had a single holdout in camp. I don't see this one, and he had the number 6 overall pick, the number 3, not had a single holdout. I don't see him having an issue with, number 22 on this new slotted scale that's already predetermined. It won't be hard. I think simple, easy deal, gets done tomorrow. It's going to be signed. These guys are all going to be done. There might be an incentive or 2 that he has to give up, but whatever, he won't care. And he'll be there for the first day of camp. I think he'll be there the first minute, first practice of camp. That's what I think is going to happen. Sean Renfree, I think he's going to be there too. The question right now really is, who is that 90th man on the roster going to be? Because they did cut Tune for a reason. What is that reason?
It does seem like, I can't remember the last time they did it, but didn't they pick up Peterson like last year or the year before when they cut to Tupu or Manawai like the day before camp? I remember, was it 08 when they got Grady Jackson the day before camp? I'm sure there's a couple other names I'm missing, but it does seem like The Falcons have a history, at least a couple of times under Dimitroff, of going out and signing that guy, the day before camp. And
Now, how crazy would this be if tomorrow we wake up and 4 names pop up on the Atlanta Falcons site? Matt Ryan agrees to new extension.
mm-hmm.
Big thing that everybody knows is coming. But
Mm-hmm.
Matt Ryan agrees to extension. Desmond Trufant signs. Sean Renfree signs as a throw-in. Later in the day, Richard Seymour has agreed to terms with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah,
Just saying. I'm just saying it would not shock me.
I like where your head's at. Yeah, I like all those moves happening tomorrow. I'm rooting for it. I really want this Matt Ryan deal to get done sooner rather than later. And obviously, I don't want Renfree or Trufant to miss any time. And, I think getting someone like Richard Seymour would be a great move for the Falcons at this point. There isn't a whole lot of defensive tackle depth, and I do think the Falcons, by the end of camp, maybe going to have to be able to address that issue because, after you get past, we'll get into this a little later when we talk about the roster, but after you get past Jonathan Babineau and Corey Peters and Travion Robertson, there isn't a whole lot to love about the Falcons' defensive tackle position.
No. And you know what? Let's just jump into it.
Let's do it.
Looking at the defensive tackles, I only think 4 make the roster.
Surprise, surprise. So do I. I only think 4 will make the roster too.
And as it sits right now, Parade Jerry's getting that 4th spot. I think they give him one last shot to show that he's worth a damn. If he doesn't, he's gone.
I can't do it. I just can't put Parade Jerry on the roster for another year. Yeah, I'm going with McConnor Regis, but only just because I think he's a placeholder for the defensive tackle. If it's not Seymour tomorrow or whenever, it's going to be somebody else at the end of camp once cuts are made. But, the Falcons can save, like $900,000 against the cap by cutting Jerry. He's a free agent after this season. There's like a negative 12% chance he's going to get a new deal after the season. I just can't see the Falcons justifying, keeping him at, $2 million cap hit.
I'm with you there. I can't see the Falcons keeping them at that cap hit. But I really can't see it happening if they bring in Richard Seymour.
Yeah.
And I think that's the name that, they give Seymour 5. They take the 1 away from Jerry, so it's really only 4 effectively on the cap. Okay, that makes some sense. I could see something like that going down. But I'm with you on the top 3. Peters, Babineau, they start. Robertson gets a lot more playing time. I think you'll see Matthews and Goodman play defensive tackle on game days as well. Just because they've got the body for it. They're both 285-pound guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those 2 guys shouldn't have an issue. On the other side of things, when it comes to defensive ends, I think there's a lot of talent there. I think you've got a couple guys who can play defensive tackle or defensive end. I think you got 4 or 5 guys who can play end or linebacker, depending on the set. And I think they're going to have a lot of fun with this Mike Nolan multiple scheme, for their defensive ends. So I've got my 6. Do you think they're going to keep 6, or how many do you think?
I got 6 as well, and I'm pretty confident we're going to have the same 6, but go ahead with yours.
Pretty much, if they've been drafted by the Falcons, they're on the roster. So Matthews, Goodman, Massaquoi, Bierman, Mapanga, 3 M's, a G and a B,
Yeah. And an OC.
Massaquoi, Mapanga, and Bierman sounds like a friggin' law firm.
Yeah, in Kenya or something like that.
Yeah, in Africa. Yeah, exactly.
Human Yora, you got the complete set.
But no, yeah, OC's making the roster. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
I'm not questioning that one. The only way he doesn't make the roster is if he has an injury the same way Tatupu did. That's the only way he won't make the roster. And even then, I think he'll still make the roster. They'll just throw him on injured reserve.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess there's no real argument at defensive end. Let's look at the linebackers. This is where I think we might be quite different. I've got 6 making the roster, and then I've got 1 to 2 on the practice squad. Out of the 9 guys that they're taking to camp.
I got 5 on the roster and 2 on the practice squad.
All right, so I'm going to put this out there. The 3 starters, they're in. Akeem Dent, Nicholas Spoon, they're in. I'm on the Pat Schiller bandwagon.
All right, good to hear.
I think he's the backup strong side / special teams middle guy for game days. I think Brian Banks makes the roster. And I think Paul Warlow beats out Robert James for the weak side / special teamer guy on that one. I just think that's how it's going to work out. I really like Pat Schiller. I really like Paul Warlow. And if Brian Banks doesn't make the active roster, he will be on the practice squad.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to see Banks not making it. It's, I don't even want to say it, unless he falls completely flat on his face, but I just don't see that happening at all because I think Brian Banks wants it too much for that to happen.
I also think Clancy and Bartu both get invited back to the practice squad. It's just whether they, get signed by someone else. I think all 9 guys, well, everybody that's not named Robert James, I think everybody that's not named Robert James ends up on a 53-man roster or in the Falcons practice squad this next season. I think they're all that good.
Okay. My 5 are the 3 starters, as you mentioned, Nicholas, Spoon, and Dent. And I'm picking Schiller and Banks to make the 2 last spots on the roster. I think Warlow and Clancy will be on the practice squad. I'm with you on the Warlow. I think Warlow definitely there. It's funny not picking Robert James because he seems to be immortal when it comes to making the team. He gets cut at the end of training camp and they bring him back to the practice squad and someone gets hurt at the end of the year and he ends up finishing the season on the roster. Or last year, he actually made the team. It just seems like, nothing against Robert James. He's a fine player, but it's just like, it just seems like for a guy who has very little signature moments over the last, now 5 years? He was 08 draft pick. It just seems like, it's like, how is this guy, still around when you're like, what's the thing that Robert James has done?
He's the defensive Anton Smith.
He had a sack last preseason. That was the first Robert James highlight I remember seeing in 5 years.
And everybody exploded. We were like, yeah, Robert James, he finally gave us something to be excited for. See, I think Paul Warlow will go out in the preseason to play gangbusters. That's why I think that he's going to make the roster. Just because in game, when you see him on the field, you see him do all his drills, he was fast during his drills. In game, he's faster. He's just a monster. The fact that he played at Delaware hurts him because he was a linebacker at a school that sucked, that nobody cared about. Yeah. I mean, no one goes to Delaware and says, hey, let me check out their linebackers. The Falcons could have taken him in the 7th round over Zeke Mata and been like, boom, hey, that's our guy. And nobody would have questioned it. Because it would have been like, they would have looked at his stat line and been like, man, 100 tackles a year? This guy's a beast. If you actually look at his stat lines, Paul Warlow is a friggin' monster. He averaged 100 sacks a year, or 100 tackles a year. He averaged 4 sacks, 2 pass deflections, and a forced fumble every year. we're not talking about some weak, like, POS linebacker. We're talking about a pretty good linebacker.
Yeah.
Knocked the ball away, got interceptions, knocked the ball out of the guy's hands, played up to 15 games in a season, was always making plays behind the line. There's no reason for him to not. I mean, let's just look at at this last season. Cumulative season statistics. If Atlanta could get him to do half of what he did last year. So he had 107 tackles. 9 of them were behind the line. He had 3 sacks. He had 2 pass breakups. He had 1 forced fumble, and he had an interception.
Yeah, you're right. Half of that would be great.
I mean, half of that would be great. As the starting strong side linebacker, half of that would be great. I still don't understand how he wasn't selected. Very much like Kamal Ishmael, I don't understand, after going back and seeing his name with the Falcons and then going back and watching his film, because he was never on any of my watch lists. That probably explains why I didn't know about him. And then I go back and I watch him and I'm like, how the hell was this guy not in my top 200?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what the hell am I missing here? So, I'm not saying he's going to be like a Jesse Tuggle type steal.
Who is? Outside London Fletcher, who has been that type of steal?
I mean, but we are kind of due for that next undrafted linebacker in the NFL to be great, right?
Yeah.
And I think if it's going to be anybody, it's going to be Paul Warlow. Just instincts, speed. I mean, he can cover tight ends. Well, I mean, come on now. The kid can cover tight ends. What have we been sucking at the past year?
Yeah, it's a skill.
Covering tight ends.
Falcons sorely need that. Yeah. Look, you mentioned Kamal Ishmael, so let's talk a little bit about the safeties.
I think 4 make the roster. Okay. Only 4. I think it's Sean Schillinger's time to say bye-bye.
Okay.
I don't think Zeke Mata makes the roster. And I don't think Troy Sanders makes the roster. Meaning Kamal Ishmael. I think he's got a spot. I think Charles Mitchell has a spot. And then I think the 2 Pro Bowlers have a spot.
Okay. I'm with 5. I just threw Mata into that mix as the 5th guy. I'm with you on Schillinger not making it. I do love me some Sean Schillinger on special teams, but I think Ishmael can pick up that slack. I think he's going to be, if not by the end of this year, next year he'll be the captain of the Falcons special teams. I think Mata can also make an impact on special teams. I like the fact that, Notre Dame hasn't produced many great, safeties. Outside Harrison Smith, you got to go back 15, 20 years before they had a good safety. But they've steadily produced a lot of good backup safeties over the last 10 or so years, and almost every single one of them impact on special teams. And I just think, they teach them, good special teams when they're not in church or whatever. So that's cool. So,
classes, church, special teams, football.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I expect him to do what all the other guys do, shine on special teams, and I think that'll get him on the roster. The scenario you outlined is just as it's not like that's probably also because Mata could make the practice squad and they could go with 4.
It's all dependent on that last safety or linebacker spot. So if they do go with just 5 linebackers, I would honestly take Banks off of my group, and I think that he makes the practice squad. But I think he does make the, roster, if you will. And I think Warlow sits for a year behind Nicholas, and then next year takes over the starting spot. I'm I really think Warlow can be that guy that the Falcons need in coverage that could actually complement Weatherspoon as both a coverage guy, a blitzer. He stops the run. He's got good instincts. He could play in the middle, and you can move Dent to the strong side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, what you're thinking of Paul Warlow doing is exactly what I think Pat Schiller could wind up doing. So, we're expecting one of these guys to step up and be that guy. So
exactly.
it's gonna be interesting to see who has if whoever has a stronger preseason can kind of catapult themselves into that role potentially.
And don't get me wrong, if the Falcons in 2014 rolled out with a lineup of, Sean Weatherspoon, Pat Schiller, and Paul Warlow, I wouldn't complain. It'd probably be a pretty good lineup.
Probably.
Probably be a lineup that could cover a tight end and stop the run.
What? Yeah.
What? He can actually do that? Speaking of coverage, cornerbacks, I only think 5 do it, make the roster. I think you got your top 4 guys. Robert Alford, Robert McClain, Robert Trufant, Robert Samuel. No, Asante Samuel and Desmond Trufant. It does feel like all of them have their name as Robert, but
yeah.
I think all 4 of those guys set in stone. I do think that Dominique Franks is gone this year.
Okay. I was curious if you were going to go that way.
Mike Nolan does not like him. Just does not like him at all. And Keith Armstrong does not like him either. It would not shock me to see Troy Sanders make the roster as a corner that plays inside, plays backup safety, plays backup corner, and does that. But the name that I think actually makes the roster, and we might be the same on this one, is Terrence Johnson.
Yeah, I was looking at some tape of Terrence Johnson because he's kind of like the forgotten guy. By the way, I do agree with you on the top 4. I have a 5th guy. I'm sort of torn between Terrence Johnson and Peyton Thompson. I like the fact that Thompson is eligible for the practice squad, which could mean you could put Johnson on the roster and then put Thompson on the practice squad, so keep both of those guys. I like the fact that, Johnson can play in the slot, and I think that's an underrated trait for his chances of making a team. I think he also has the speed and the toughness to be able to be an excellent gunner on special teams. And if the Falcons do wind up cutting your boy Antone Smith, the Falcons are going to need some help out there.
I think they cut Antone Smith, though, because Ronnie Wingo can be that gunner. Because he's the size of a linebacker and he hits like 1-2. I've seen him go down on special teams for Arkansas and just knock a dude's head off. I mean, and Arkansas might as well be the SEC. Or not the SEC. The SEC might as well be the NFL.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, you see what I'm sorry. You understand where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Arkansas wasn't even that good in the SEC, and they still had good special teams.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do with who was out there. And Ronnie Wingo was knocking people's heads. I mean, do you want Antone Smith, or do you want a guy who's like Antone Smith but 6'2", 230 pounds, and runs the same speed?
Yeah, I just want the guy who's going to be knocking heads. So it doesn't really matter to me. And it could easily be Wingo.
I think it will be Wingo. And I think Wingo will provide more long-term to the offense.
Yeah. With the corners, today I'm going with Terrence Johnson. Tomorrow I'll probably wake up and be like, no, pick Peyton Thompson. And if it's Thompson that ends up winning the job, I'll be like, yeah, I was with Peyton Thompson the whole time. And if it's Terrence Johnson, I can be like, yeah, I picked Terrence Johnson. So that's the one spot that, out of the 53, or, we're up to 50, I guess, that, I'm a little iffy on, and I could be persuaded. But, today I'm going with Johnson for that last cornerback spot.
whoever, whoever wins the job out of the three guys deserves it. That's all I'm going to say, because it's going to be one of those three guys. I don't even think they've got a fourth guy at corner. They do. They got Alabama State's C. Lee. He's maybe in the practice squad, but I don't really. I mean, Alabama State to the NFL, I'm not seeing much. No offense, Seed. I don't think it happens.
Yeah. The small school corners. You know, when you look at the small school guys, typically the guys that do make it in the NFL are either wide receiver, cornerbacks, but a lot of these guys kind of need a year to develop. So maybe Lee on the practice squad. I don't know about you, Scott, but you know, now that Robert McClain shocked the world in his ability to come out of nowhere, it just makes me like a little bit weary on picking that corner. Who's going to be that guy? Because now I'm kind of expecting every year who's going to be that Robert McClain that comes out of nowhere. And, because Grimes was, the same type of dude a couple of years back before. Some guy like, oh, who's this Brent Grimes dude? And then he comes out of nowhere and becomes Brent Grimes. And now, McClain's kind of in the same boat. So,
I mean, the difference with McClain was I thought he was going to be really good coming out of college. And then he got drafted in the 7th. And I was like, all right, that's fine. He'll still bust his ass and make it. Well, he kind of did, and then he needed the right scheme. And he needed the right coach to just throw him in the slot, because that's what he did best at Connecticut. Well, what does he do in Atlanta? He's in the slot. He's a beast. I would have spent a 3rd-round pick to have a good slot man back in 2010.
Exactly. Slot corner, one of the hardest positions on defense to fill.
And you know what's frustrating about that Robert McClain pick? What? Is that instead of Sean Schillinger, the Falcons could have taken Robert McClain.
There you have it.
So Schillinger's provided nothing in 3 years. Robert McClain's provided actual talent and went, let's see, Schillinger was taken 171. Robert McClain went 249. 78 picks later. Come on, man. It's like no one knew who Sean Schillinger was going into the draft. Everybody knew who Robert McClain was going into the draft, and had you taken him in the 6th, no one would have questioned it. I honestly think it was one of those, everybody had just one guy ahead of him for 4 straight rounds. You know how you feel that way about some players? You're like, he's gonna go. He's gonna go. He's going to go. Why is he falling?
We thought that about Arthur Brown. Like, okay, here he's going to get picked right here. Ravens pick 1st round. Here he goes. Nope, Matt Elo. He's going to get top of the 2nd. Yeah. Nope.
It's like, why did Zoltan Mesko go in the 5th round? What the hell? Who takes a punter? That kind of stuff. NFL draft is full of that kind of stuff. Now, I knew when Arthur Brown fell to like 55, 56, I was like, Atlanta is waiting for him to fall in their laps right now. And I go, and just watch friggin' Baltimore or Seattle or somebody trade up and get him. Well, what happens? Friggin' Baltimore trades up to get him. Screw you, Baltimore. I wanted Arthur Brown on the Falcons.
I know you did.
Although I think had DJ Swearinger fallen, Atlanta might have taken him instead of Robert Alford.
That would have been interesting.
Because he can play nickel corner, and he can play safety.
And he can cover a tight end?
And he can cover a tight end. But he fits the big nickel that Mike Nolan loves to run. And they looked at a lot of guys for that big nickel spot. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be a very good team this year. I think it goes without saying that we've each got 3 specialists. You've got Josh Harris, the long snapper. You've got good old Matt the Basher Bosher at punter. And then you got Matt Bryant, which, yes, all of our specialists are named Matt, at kicker. So I think we both agree with that one.
No, I got Sean Selwood. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, we're
I mean, unless one of the guys gets like a freak ACL injury.
Lightning strikes, yeah.
Yeah, like lightning strikes him. I don't see either Shelley or Selwood making the roster. Again,
they're working out to make somebody else's team pretty much. That's
exactly.
What they're trying to do.
I think they will make a roster. I just don't think it will be the Falcons roster. And I think the only reason why Shelley decided to try out with Atlanta this year is because, you know what? If Matt Bryant gets injured, it's right there. We're right next to Alabama.
Exactly.
But no, I mean, that's what I've got. That's the roster. And
speaking of which, special teams, before we cut out of here, who do you think are going to be the returners this year?
That's like picking the smartest midget or the tallest midget. I wanted to say the smartest retard or the tallest midget. I mean, like, it is like picking the tallest midget. And with one of them, I think it will be a midget. I think Jacquizz Rodgers is the kick returner again. And I don't know. Punt returner is like the biggest question mark on the team. Unless they just say, you know what, Robert Alford, you're not going to be the starter at left corner. You're going to learn behind Asante Samuel for a year. You're not winning the slot job. You're not winning the right corner job. Your job is to be backup left corner, fourth defensive back, and punt returner. They do that, then Robert Alford's going to be the punt returner.
Mm-hmm.
And he will be a friggin' beast at punt returner. Because he was awesome in 1AA as a punt returner. Which means he's going to be at least good in the pros.
I agree.
And yeah, he's a second round pick. You don't risk it. I don't see the Falcons running that many packages that are going to have their 6 defensive backs on the field. I mean, yeah, they've got 6 really good defensive backs. I just don't see them running a lot of packages with all 6 of them out there. I feel like Alford was taken in case Asante Samuel gets another injury again this year, just to make sure they've got 3 guys who are competent.
Yeah, I think the scenario you laid out, I think it's going to be Samuel, McClain, Trufant handling the corner spots. I think it's going to free up Alford to handle the punt return jobs. I do think he's got a legit shot to take over the kickoff job. I do think, Jacquizz Rodgers still may keep that job just because he may not get as many carries on offense. And so that allows him to, maybe focus a little bit more on being the best kick returner he could be as opposed to in everything that he had to be last year because of Michael Turner. But I had another point. I blanked on it. Sorry.
Basically, Rodgers will have kick returning as his primary duty. And I agree, and I think he'll do very well at it. And he won't need to worry about playing on offense as much, but they'll tell him to take the ball out more. So I agree with you there. I think that having Jacquizz Rodgers back there, it might not be ideal long term, but the goal is to win a Super Bowl right now. It's not to set up next year, it's to set up this year. And I think for this year, remember how last week we were talking about this guy he may not be take it back to the house every time guy, but he'll bring it out to the 30 and give you good field position every play. That's Jacquizz Rodgers on kickoffs.
Yeah.
He's not going to take it back to the house, but you'll have it at the 27. You'll have it at the 30 every single drive. I'll take that every single time. Matt Ryan would much rather have that guy than the guy who every single time it's at the 18 to 20 and then he'll magically return one for a touchdown. No. Offenses want the guy that'll give him the ball at the 30 and then, he might give it to them at the opponent's 40 one time or the opponent's 30 one time. But basically the guy who'll never score a touchdown, that's Jacquizz Rodgers. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he scores a touchdown, but he'll still provide those other returns that'll just make him a really good returner.
Yeah. When Yeah, sorry, my mind is going on. We're gonna end the show pretty quick. But when you're an offensively challenged team, you want that Leon. You remember a couple of years ago when Leon Washington was the Seahawks offense.
Yeah.
But when you're the Falcons offense, you don't need a dynamic kick. You don't need Devin Hester in his prime or Dante Hall in his prime. You just need someone who can reliably get you yards. Let Matt Ryan, let Julio Jones, let Steve Jackson go to work. And that's what all you really want as a out of a return specialist.
Exactly. Make them get 70 yards instead of 80 every drive.
Yeah.
Because they don't care about their yardage. They just want to score touchdowns. You got the firepower to score from 90 yards out if you need it. But why use it every single time? So.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's all I've got for this week. For Aaron Freeman, I'm Scott Carasik. Make sure you check us out on Twitter. We're at Falcons PFC. Also at Scott Carasik and at FalcFans, FalcFans. Also make sure to check out our sponsors, onit.com/football radio. And then make sure you also check out fifthdowncigar.com. And then you enter the code PFC. Oh, you get 10% off too.
All right.
As a Jew, I endorse this. Here's a coupon, everybody. Sorry, I'm going a little loopy today.
Yeah, both of us. Yeah, we apologize. We'll do a better job next week.
All right, for Aaron Freeman, I'm Scott Carasik, and this has been another edition of Falcons Central Radio.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.